Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is the session about disruptive innovation in the Middle East and Europe. I'm very honored to being here with you and the great guests. So before starting the session, let me show you one slide. This is a ranking based on which country is entrepreneurial. And according to this ranking by Global Entrepreneurship Development Institute, US is ranked first, and Japan, unfortunately, ranked 36. And speaking of startups, we Japanese tend to look only at Silicon Valley. But now we are seeing the rise of startups outside of US. And for example, United Kingdom and Israel and Scandinavian countries, especially Finland, are getting much attention as a new startup hub. And today we welcome great entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, and government officials from these countries. So everyone, first of all, could you please introduce yourself, your company, what you are doing? So David, let's start from you.
First, I would like to thank Tani-san for inviting me to tell the Israeli story of entrepreneurial spirit and culture of innovation. Exactly 24 years ago, I came first to Japan and decided to tie up my business career with Japan. Started by studying in Kyoto University, and after my master course, I came to Tokyo to work for 3 years. Then returned to Israel in 1996 and started with the venture capital investment business. Our firm is an investment company managing venture capital funds, was established in 1997 as part of Israeli government Yozma program with capital from Asian investors. We have managed 5 funds to date with total capital under management of $600 million. We invested in more than 100 companies. We are very proud to have part of our LPs, of our investors, many Japanese investors. Some of them you can see on the screen. Some of them requested not to be mentioned. Actually, we have 19 companies and business companies and financial institutions from Japan that invested with us over the years. And actually, in the new coming fund, we will also have some internet-related companies. We are actually the largest firm in Israel, and I believe also comparing Europe, but to Europe in terms of the number of Japanese LPs and capital base coming from Japan. Actually, the reason why Japanese corporate investor invested with us is not only because of the capital gain that they can get, but also because of the strategic value that we give them by having access to Israeli technologies. And we have a track record not only on the financial side, but also on business creation side, actually deals that we initiated between our portfolio companies and our Japanese strategic LPs. In order to make a good capital gain, we think that Japan is also one of our main reasons why we are successful. We bring our companies to this country and introduce the portfolio companies, make business deals, and this is actually increasing the revenues of our companies, and the share price go before IPO or M&A, and this is why it allows us to make profitable exits. This is just a partial list of our exits. We invested in 108 companies, and more than 30 went either public or M&A. Up at the left side, you can see Waze. Actually, this is our most recent exit. This is a company which developed technology for mobile navigation based on crowdsourcing and social networks. We were investor in the first round of this company, identified it when it had only 2,000 users and only in Israel. And we paid a valuation, pre-money valuation for this company of $8 million. When we sold this company to Google last year, company already had 50 million users worldwide, with growing by 3 million every month, and we sold it to Google for more than $1 billion. We are quite happy with this, and most happy are our investors. Please remember this company when I'll speak about the entrepreneurial spirit and recovery from failures. These are the areas we are focusing on: digital media technologies, fixed mobile broadband, enterprise IT, and a little bit of green tech. I know some of the attendees of this summit are interested in these areas. A few words I would like to say about Israel as a background before discussion on the panel about the entrepreneurial spirit and the culture of innovation. Israel is a very small country, only 8 million people. Territorial size of Shikoku Island, more or less. So it's obvious, and we have no natural resources, like Japan. So innovation is a must for us. It's actually a necessity. It's not an option. And also because it's such a small market, our companies have to go to think global and to go global almost from day one. We have many startup companies being established in Israel, about 700 new startup, I'm talking only high-tech companies, with a total of about 5,000 currently. Most of it is financed by the venture capital industry, by funds like ourselves. Actually, Israel has, if you can see in this slide, quite a lot of VC capital investment into the startup companies, actually #1 in the world per capita. Also, if you look the number of startup companies per capita, Israel is the #1. And every year, investment into the startup companies in Israel, this is between $1 to $2 billion. Success of Israeli high-tech companies is also shown by the listing on NASDAQ. Actually, Israeli companies are ranked #1 after US companies in NASDAQ listings. One interesting phenomena is the fact that many multinationals established their R&D centers in Israel, more than 250 multinationals. Many of them, or most of them, through acquisition of a local startup company, turned it into R&D center. So when Apple first thought about making R&D center out of Cupertino, and everybody knows that Apple is a very secretive company, the place he decided to establish the first after Cupertino was Israel, by acquiring an Israeli company called Anobit. Same with Facebook, acquired Israeli company and made it the first place for R&D for Facebook. And Google has many R&D centers, at least two R&D centers, and you see a number of other multinationals here. These acquisitions, actually, it's one of our exit strategies, actually main exit strategy for venture capital funds. So we are quite happy to tell you that along the years, so many acquisitions of Israeli companies have occurred. You can see that Microsoft acquired 14 Israeli startup companies, IBM 13 companies, Cisco 11, and so forth. Recently, we see also Google and Facebook 3 companies each. And very important, the most recent acquisition early this year of Israeli company, not registered in Israel, but it's actually Israeli company. The founder and CEO is here, Mr. Marco Talmon, actually located, based in Tel Aviv, the headquarters in Tel Aviv. And this company was acquired by Rakuten early this year. I heard from Mr. Talmon about the fast decision-making that was done by Mr. Mikitani, and also the very fast execution in few weeks, just from meeting the company until completing the deal. I think it's really remarkable. And if you are talking in Jane now about new economy, maybe new way of doing business, I think this is really a lesson to learn how fast can decision be made and also the execution to the end of the deal. In this sense, also, I see Rakuten as a pioneer in Israel in making such a remarkable deal. Just quickly to tell you, the source of Israeli high-tech talent is by the engineers and scientists. Israel is #1 in the world in per capita in this number. And also, if you look just to how much money is spent on technological R&D, every year, Israel also #1 per the GDP of the country. Thank you.
Please, Talmon, please.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. My name is Talmon Marco. I run Viber Media, a company recently acquired by Rakuten. So we are now Japanese, which gives us a very unique perspective on Japan, unlike, well, other companies. The internet is a remarkable thing. If you look at Viber, Viber has most of its personnel located in 2 places, in Belarus and in Israel. This is where we do our R&D, our product. We have a few marketing offices outside of these 2 countries, but at the end of the day, that's where we are. And within the last 3 or so years, since we launched the company, we managed to build something which is global. And we managed to build a consumer brand that is global. I was in Myanmar a few weeks ago, and you see people over there, they're using Viber. My guess is that most people within Viber don't even know where Myanmar is, but you have people over there, millions of people actually, and they're using Viber. And that is not unique to that particular market. In fact, we're a global phenomena with over 300 million people all over the world. And it's the power of the internet that allows you to do this without spending millions or billions in marketing, which also means that you can be anywhere in the world. Yes, you can be in California, you can be in New York, you can be in Boston, but you can also be in Minsk, in Belarus, you can be in Tel Aviv, you can be in Japan, you can be anywhere. You can be anywhere where talent is. And talent is really what matters here. And if I were using this, you could actually see this. So Viber is a mobile messaging application. I should probably have said what we do in the beginning. And the reason that we were able to build all of this is because of the strength of our product, not because of marketing, not because we spend money in every single market. And I can tell you all about the features and how great we are, but I don't think you want to listen to this. What's interesting is how we managed to build something that approaches consumers all over the world, and that created something which is really about fun, about lifestyle, about content, not just about technology. I'm going to use the rest of the 3 or 4 minutes which were allocated to me to show a video which was created by Viber in the Philippines. And it shows a few parties that we threw over there in, one market, and they were open to Viber users in that particular country. And you can see how people over there feel about Viber, how we see Viber everywhere, and where we're going. So hopefully this works.
Smash the club.
Thank you.
Peter, please.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm Peter, and I'm the Mighty Eagle at Rovio, better known for Angry Birds. And I guess we're also an example of the fact that you can build stuff outside of the valley. We're based in Helsinki, Finland. And yeah, we built Angry Birds. So in December 2009, we launched Angry Birds. And if you fast forward today, 4 years later, Angry Birds has more than 2 billion downloads. So Angry Birds is the most distributed piece of entertainment content ever. It's bigger than anything in games, anything in video, music, pretty much anything out there. We started with the game, but if you look at Rovio today, we are what we'd like to call a triple E company. We're active in all areas of entertainment. We are doing education at massive scale, and we're applying entrepreneurship to everything we do. So 3 E's, and it's also why I'm really happy to be here and glad that Miki invited us, because yeah, we're trying to stay true to our kind of like startup roots, and the entrepreneurship part is where kind of like the crazy ambition, crazy scale comes from. If you look at Angry Birds as a brand today, so what started as a game is now a brand that is known by 9 out of 10 Americans. 93% of the Chinese population knows the brand. Pretty much everybody in Korea knows the brand. And that's something that's pretty interesting, considering that we didn't use any money on traditional advertising or user acquisition. We built all of this using the power of the characters, power of the brand. And I think it's an example of what you can do now with digital distribution. You can be based anywhere. As we just heard, I mean, you can create amazing stuff in Belarus, in Minsk. You can do stuff in Helsinki, Israel, anywhere. You don't really need to be in any particular place. I think that's something that's super, super exciting. And if you look at Angry Birds as an example, I mean, we started with the game, then we expanded into animation. We're now running the biggest animation studio in Northern Europe. We launched our first animated series last year. In the first year, we got 2 billion views. We have one of the biggest video distribution networks on the planet because we added one button to all our games. So we have the play button and we have the Toons TV button. So again, using a game to build a massive video distribution network. So, talking about disruption, we can now reach more people than ABC, CBS, NBC, and Fox combined, because we can do this globally. So things are changing very, very fast. And if we can do this in Helsinki, you can do it in Tokyo, like easily. If you look at Finland, we're only 5 million people. We've given the world things like Linux, MySQL, Nokia, Angry Birds. Last year, SoftBank and Gung Ho invested 1.5 billion into Supercell, another great games company coming out of Finland. So things are becoming very, very global. You can do these things anywhere. But you really need to believe and you need to think that way. And again, I think that it's great that Miki organizes this, because I think that the only thing that is missing here, I come to Tokyo a lot. This is my second trip already this year, and I have kind of like lost count on how many times I've been here. We have a small office in Shibuya, and I'm always amazed, with the talent, and now more and more startups, more and more energy. But there's no reason why you can't build global success stories. I mean, Japan, of course, is a big market, but you really can build global stuff here. Amazing talent, and I really think that just need a bit more like attitude and ambition and kind of like go do it. I mean, Rakuten, great example, but you can do, if we can do this in Helsinki, 5 million people, I mean, that's less than Tokyo. So like if you look at all of Japan, you can do amazing things. And yeah, we're kind of like example that even like middle of nowhere, Helsinki, Finland, you can build something like Angry Birds. So, you know, you can do that as well. And maybe one more thing on kind of like the Rovio side. So yeah, we launched animation. We're also big in consumer products. So we are told that, hey, what do you guys know about the toy business? And yeah, what do we know about the toy business? But we found partners who know everything about the toy business. And in fact, of our business, almost half is now physical products. Toys, books, soft drinks. We're even building parks. So all of this started with a little game called Angry Birds. Thanks.
Thank you. Chris.
Well, the moderators just told me I've got -2 seconds because of everybody being late. My name is Chris Wade. I'm from an organization called UKTI. This is an amazing event, and the world needs to know about this event because it is truly representative of the new economy. In a way, I'm not surprised. My first trip to Tokyo was in 1999, where I was meeting Docomo because I was building a technology company that was doing location algorithms for mobile phones, and the only mobile phone company that knew about location technologies and knew about iMode was Docomo. A couple of years ago, I received a call from the UK government. And normally I'm thinking, have I paid my taxes or have I been caught speeding or something like that? And actually it was, we don't want you to start another company. We want you to come and help start a country. And we worked for an organization called UKTI, UK Trade and Investment. The trade bit is helping companies to export from the UK, and investment is to help investors come into the UK. That organization had been focused on major infrastructure projects, nuclear power plants, helping Japanese companies build amazing car factories in the UK. They had not been in the early stage environment. My job was to put them there. And we started a 2-year program, a small team, and we had 3 philosophies. It was to engage with the community. Critically, and perhaps you might say difficult for government, to listen. And it was to support. And we did so in 3 major areas. Firstly, the support of graduates, our very best graduates from Cambridge and Oxford, etc. Become an entrepreneur. Don't be the next algorithmic trader with a major bank. Now, of course, in Silicon Valley and in Stanford, that's not necessary. Everybody knows that being an entrepreneur is a great thing to do. And it's becoming so in Europe. But we needed to do some more work there. The second was provide mentorship for CEOs who wanted external capital, wanted capital from overseas, wanted to take advantage of investors from around the world and their market knowledge. And I'm really pleased to say that we have had significant success in Japan, which the companies involved, who are major Japanese corporates, will be announcing shortly. We also supported an emerging managers program for VCs. This country shares a common negative problem with Europe, and that is our really fundamental venture capital years was 2 sides of the bubble, the internet bubble. In other words, most VCs were making investments on one side of the bubble and having to do their 10-year disposals on the other side. And it is no wonder that there were some difficult return conversations with LPs. But today, nearly 20 years on, entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs, are becoming venture capitalists. Their funds are small, so they're investing in A round, early stage, and they're very, very focused. And ladies and gentlemen, the last time that happened was the late 80s in Silicon Valley, and they produced the best returns ever. So we believe that there are great entrepreneurs, there are great VCs being built in Europe to join the global entrepreneurial society. Thank you.
Hey Chris, last month King.com went IPO with the market value $6 billion. Is that a typical success story from London?
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay.
No. Clearly, it's a fantastic result. And I've just been reminded by my friend that actually every successful company is origins from Scandinavia.
So King is from Sweden, actually, but yeah.
But here's the interesting thing. You create a few exits like that. And the other one this year that was caught everyone's attention was DeepMind's and the acquisition by Google for 500 million. And what that says to the investors of venture capital, the fundamental fuel of early stage companies, is there's now a business here to be played.
Okay, so I'd like to ask you all about government policy. How has each government played a big role in promoting startup activities? In that sense, let's say Israel, talking about Israel. Israeli government started Yozma program in 1993. And since then, startup community in Israel has developed dramatically. And
Correct.
now Israel is called Startup Nation.
Correct.
What is Yozma program and why it has been so effective?
Before 1993, actually innovative technologies were developed only in big companies in Israel, big relative to the size of Israel, but local companies which were quite large. The Israeli government came with the idea to start a venture capital industry, which didn't exist at that time, by giving 10 different funds. Each of them got $10 million. So altogether, government gave 100 million, with the condition that they will bring money also from overseas to match the money of the fund. So it will not be only government money. And my firm was one of them. So this is 10 funds were established, and afterwards, with the success of these 10 funds, other new funds actually were created. And altogether, since 1993 until today, all the Israeli venture capital funds, I'm talking pure Israeli VCs, not those that are coming from outside of Israel to invest, but pure Israeli VCs, raised $18 billion for the funds. So it's leverage of $100 million by the government to $18 billion, 180 times. I think it's quite remarkable. The government did very nice to establish the venture capital industry. No longer the government is involved, there is no need. But more important than that was the fact that these venture capital funds had the money and to finance those Israeli entrepreneurs who couldn't establish their companies, who waited. Some of them worked for the large corporations, some were not really so much involved in the high-tech at that side. But it gave them the courage and the money to go and establish their own startup companies. So finally, what happens, as I showed you today, we have about 5,000 startup companies in Israel. This is the main place for developing innovative technologies in Israel. The large corporations no longer are really attractive to the young people, and most of the really talented guys want to work for those startup companies that became the major engine of the Israeli high-tech industry.
Talmon, from entrepreneur's point of view, what's the benefit of doing research and development in Israel or Belarus instead of Silicon Valley?
When we started the company, all the guys that founded it, we were, let's say, in the European time zone. I actually lived in London at the time. So to us, doing R&D in that area means that it was in our time zone. There's a bit of a challenge developing software 8 or 10 time zones away. That's why you want to keep it, let's say, in the European theater and not in the US. Specifically about Israel and Belarus, we had access to good engineering talent. We already had the connections over there, so that's why we chose these markets.
Okay, so and also Finland is famous for good policy to encourage entrepreneurship, and also let's say Tekes, Finnish funding agency for technology and investment, and also you co-founded Slush conference. It's one of the biggest startup conferences in Europe. What's the importance of relation between entrepreneurship and government?
Yeah, I think that of course government can play a role, but government can't kind of like fix the problem on its own. And I think our prime minister typically says it really well that when he was asked that, okay, how did this kind of like startup explosion happen in Finland? He basically says that they don't know how it happened. And we, the entrepreneurs, the startups know how it happened because we made it so, and it took many, many years. We actually started by creating the Slush conference in 2008. First time we had like 300 people, but then like every year it's been growing, and last year we had 6,000 people there from all over the planet. And the kind of like the thing that has happened there, that we did something that was for the startups, by the startups. So we got the grassroots community going, and we got the community working together. Everybody realized that it really makes sense to work together, create things like Slush, then entrepreneurship societies at all the universities. And what has actually happened in just 6 years in Finland, I always use this example that I gave a talk in 2007 at Aalto University in Helsinki to 600 students. And I asked them, it was about entrepreneurship, and I asked them that, okay, how many here in this room will start a company when you graduate, or even, like before? And out of 600, only 3 hands went up. So like disaster. And that's actually prompted us to start Slush. And then if you fast forward to now, I did the same presentation to again 600 or so Aalto University students last year. Asked the same question. More than half of the hands went up. So in just 6 years, we made this cultural revolution happen when it comes to attitudes towards startups and entrepreneurship. But that was done by the startups, for the startups, and we're only getting started there. The goal with Slush and what we're doing is actually to build not like another Silicon Valley or something like that, but something that is better because it's different. That's also why it's called Slush. It's cold, dark, there's slush on the ground. It's not sunny, it's not pleasant, but you have amazing startups around. And I think that that's something that's very important, that you always need to get the grassroots community, the startups involved, engaged. Government can't do that. No matter how much money you pour at the problem, it's not gonna, fix it. You have to get the entrepreneurs involved.
Hi, Chris. In the last 10 years, London, especially East London, has become the startup hub, startup community, biggest startup communities in Europe. What has government done, and what is your organization is going to do to create ecosystem of startup in London and also United Kingdom overall?
Well, to Peter's point, governments don't start startups. Government don't start ecosystems. Smart governments engage, which means there's a continual dialogue. They're doing roundtables, they want to understand, they want to ask a really simple question. How can we remove obstacles for you to build the biggest company possible? And that's exactly what we did in East London. But let's be clear, it was the startups that created it. We have in Europe role models. You had Nicholas Zenström, who was here last year. He spends an enormous amount of time talking to 19, 18-year-olds about the value of running your own business. And that does more to motivate and to create it to be fashionable to become an entrepreneur. The second thing that we've enjoyed, and this isn't a European thing, it's a global thing, you can get to minimum viable product for hundreds of thousands of dollars, versus when I first started, it took millions. So you can literally do a friends and family type sort of round to get to your first product. mentorship is becoming extremely common and important. There's a lovely story that David Cohen, the MD of Textiles in Boulder, Colorado, talks about is the only thing that made Boulder, Colorado the third most significant venture capital community in the whole of the US was mentorship. And there are mentors available. You know, I'm sure these guys here will spend time mentoring companies, not much because they're busy, but the mentorship they give is really important. Now, what government does is say, what help do you need? And in the case of London, 3 things. It was tax incentives for seed investment, very significant tax investment, to help get over the problem of risk capital. The other thing that government did, because they were asked to, was to create a thing called the entrepreneur's visa. I need a key developer from India. I need to have a product manager who currently works in Apple in Cupertino. How do I get that person there for a period? And that's what they're sort of doing. And the final thing is talking about it, getting it on the agenda. The first thing I did in the first 30 days in my job was made sure all the senior ministers in the UK TI knew about 3 startups, and they could talk about them to their colleagues as they traveled around the world. So promoting and talking about it. But to Peter's point, it's about listening and supporting and just tearing down the obstacles.
Okay, thank you. So the topic of this session is disruptive innovation. So from micro point of view, what's necessary to make disruptive innovation happen? Let's say, of course, technology matters, but except for technology, let's say marketing or branding or culture or spirits of entrepreneurship is also very matters. So somebody, would you like to point out something?
Okay. If I can tell the Israeli story of entrepreneurial spirit, we Israelis don't like to work for others. We want to be our own boss. This is basic for us. And our culture actually is differentiate yourself from the others. Not to be one of the crowd, you want to be different. This is one thing. And I think that also gives the people motivation to go and establish their own business. Another important thing is that our education system actually believe that error is forgivable. We let our pupils at school to make mistakes. This is not a shame to make mistakes. And later, when these students, people, become entrepreneurs, even if they fail in their business, they can recover. We as venture capitalists give money sometimes to those entrepreneurs who failed once, so long as we believe that they learned the lesson. They understand why they failed, and they can manage their ways better in the next startup company. Actually, I mentioned to you before Waze. This is our very big exit of last year. When we invested in the company, we were first round, we decided to bring a CEO to the company. The company was then in Israel. We wanted to move it to the US. This is the model for many Israeli companies, to move the headquarters after a while to US, still the R&D in Israel. And we had to choose a CEO. And we interviewed a few. The board decided finally to choose a person who failed in his previous business, in his previous startup that was closed. But we were confident that he really understands why he failed and that he can do much better in this case. And indeed, the results speak for themselves. That means that our society gives the people the motivation somehow to take risks, which is, in our opinion, very, very important, because that means even if you fail, it doesn't mean you're doomed to business death. Also, if I may relate to the innovation culture in Israel, which is also important to develop what we have been done, this is also starting from school and goes later. Our culture encourages the people to create new things. But it's not enough this to go through the education system. Actually, it's a culture where there is no hierarchy. We are quite flat. If you look in our companies, well, you can see who is the boss, but the employees speak to the boss almost like to each other or to the subordinate. This creates also a very open discussion and actually even a debate between the people in the company. And sometimes people may tell the boss that he is not right, that there is another way to do it. Of course, you have to be polite, but still you have to make your opinion very clearly. We speak very directly. There is no tatemae in our talk. So we think that this fact really allows to get to faster and to better decision making, just by having almost no hierarchy and a very smooth talk between the people, very open talk. I'll give you one example also to explain how flexible Israelis are in obeying the rules. Some people say Israelis not always obeying the rules. They do whatever they want. Sometimes it is successful, sometimes it is not. In the Intel laboratories, Intel has a few R&D centers in Israel. So in the R&D center in Haifa, a few years ago, a team of engineers came with the idea to develop what we know today as the multi-core technology. And they presented it to the US management. And they told them, don't touch it. Don't waste time, the company's time on this. But the guys really believed that this is the right thing to develop at that time. So in addition, parallel to making development of other things they were assigned to do, mainly in their free time, they developed the multi-core technology. And in those days, Intel was somehow in kind of decline, and the head of that team went to the US, and he told the management there, you remember some time ago we told you we want to develop the multi-core technology? We did it. And the management looked, they liked what they saw, and they immediately embraced and endorsed it. So sometimes you take even risk, not to work according to what you were told to do, but in this case, this is a good example how this actually can bring to success.
Do you agree with his opinion, Talmon?
I generally agree with him.
Mhm.
We see that a lot at Viber. People will have. There'll be no problem for a QA engineer or a product manager to come in and say, I disagree with you. And sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong, but there's definitely a willingness to share opinions, to disagree, to challenge. Otherwise, if you don't do that, if you're always right by definition, then why did you hire so many people? Is it just a division of labor? You're getting so much more by allowing people to challenge you. This goes back, in my opinion, it's a cultural thing. Yes, in Israel, the culture is really, it's just the way it is. I don't think it's by design. And I don't think that people are necessarily overly polite when they tell you that you're wrong, but that's okay. We're willing to live with it. If you're looking at Japan, I would consider, things like doing away with the uniform in school, letting people be more individualistic. I think they can stay polite, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. But yeah, create an environment which encourages individualism, thinking out of the box. There's a famous thing on Star Trek, actually, where Captain Kirk is the only one that solves a certain problem called the Kobayashi Maru. And I don't know how many of you know of that thing. And he does this by breaking the rules, by reprogramming the system. Encourage this sort of thinking out of the box by telling these stories, by allowing people to meet with entrepreneurs, by creating a visa environment, which if you don't have entrepreneurs in Japan, bring them over. There are plenty of them, plenty of people in India, for example, who are dying to build businesses. Allow them to come over. when you see somebody who's an entrepreneur and a successful one and then an approachable one, then you can say, you know what? Yeah, maybe I can do that as well.
Peter, you can talk about maybe from marketing side. You are the professional of marketing.
Yeah, let's say that we do a bit of marketing and branding. As it's probably apparent if you look at the stage here as well, that and the audience, that there are not that many people wearing red or wearing red hoodies, and it kind of works. So it's an example of again, you have to stand out. You have to do things differently, especially if you're a startup. So I think that's something that's super important. So I think that it's not all about the technology. Technology is available everywhere. I mean, just heard you can get multi-core from Israel, and you can get like all kinds of cool stuff from UK, and even in Finland we do some technology. But I think that and the Valley obviously. But it's again, many times we're dealing with very crowded markets, and you have to stand out, and you can do that through branding. So it's not always that the best technology wins or something like that. It really is about getting the whole package right. Yes, the technology needs to be there. The solution needs to be great. I mean, we need to make great games. We need to create great experiences. But guess what? A lot of other people do that. It's again something that is kind of like just the ticket to get to the playing field and to participate is that you have a great product. But then you really need to differentiate, and you need to stand out. So I think that's super important, that you really need to do that. And as an example also about the uniform thing, I think that we really should encourage people to be individuals and stand out. So what we did at Slush, last year, we had the Prime Minister of Finland, Jyrki Katainen, was there. We had the Deputy Prime Minister of Russia, Arkady Dvorkovich. What did they wear when they presented on stage? Hoodies. Jyrki was wearing a blue Team Finland hoodie, and then Arkady couldn't do any worse, so he quickly got a Sochi Winter Olympic red hoodie from his staff. Okay, he had to call Medvedev first and check if it's okay to wear a hoodie on stage in Finland, but anyway, he did that. And I think, so we need to also encourage our leaders, to lead by example. And I think that that's something that, again, here in Japan, it's okay to stand out. That's what entrepreneurs do. That's what startups do. So I really think that that's super important. And maybe one more point there also, diversity. At Rovio, we have more than 40 nationalities working at the company. I mean, it's super important. If we build products for Japan, who knows Japan best? You guys. I only come here to visit. So, what do I know? We work with local people, local teams, to build products that are great for Japan. And my only goal in Japan for us is that we want to be more Japanese than you guys, more Japanese than Japanese. That's the only ambition for us there. So I think that, it's not just about the technology. That's very important.
Chris, any comments on this topic?
I can't resist telling you a very quick story when the Prime Minister of the UK, David Cameron, met Mark Zuckerberg. Due to a miscommunication, David Cameron, the Prime Minister of the UK, wore a hoodie, and Mark Zuckerberg had a suit. True story.
It's doing things differently again, so it works.
I guess that's the point. Two things. Fail fast and aspiration. It's okay to try an idea out. We have the brilliance of cloud. We have the brilliance of app stores. You can try things out really quickly, and if they catch on, fantastic. If they don't, say, it's okay, I'm going to pivot, I'm going to evolve. And the final thing is aspiration. Bold, global aspiration is not monopolistically owned by Silicon Valley entrepreneurs, as clearly is proven by many people in this room. Think big, and the world will come to your feet.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, so we'd like to take questions, a few questions from audience. If you have questions, please raise your hand. No question? Over there. あちらでお願いします。
Well, thank you for the great speech, everyone. I want to ask about the Israel situation right now. What makes Israel great in terms of entrepreneurship, and what can we learn from it?
About Israel, maybe Talmon. Yeah.
Israel is great in terms of entrepreneurship because it's in inert culture, if you wish. There's a culture of disagreement, of challenging. People just never seem to agree with each other. I mean, if you look at our politics, and when they say that it's a country of 8 million generals. So when everybody thinks that they know better, occasionally somebody does. It's just a matter of statistics. People are willing to try. And there's one more thing. The US and to a certain degree the UK have a bit of an advantage, English. And that's something that Israel in many ways has because most people in Israel speak English. And that's definitely a recommendation for Japan. Speak more English. At Rakuten we actually do that. This is the official language of Rakuten. Highly, highly recommended. Englishnization.
Any other questions? そちらの方、そちらのスーツ着た方。手を挙げていただいていいですか。あ、はい、お願いします。そちらの方にお願いします。
Thank you for a wonderful speech. And I'm Takashi Enokiro from Freebit, Japan. And many Japanese people said that for Japanese IT company have the handicap because of using Japanese language. And they lose during translating Japanese English as development of speed. And when I visited at the Vietnam and Cambodia, I saw the people wearing T-shirts, printed Rovio and Angry Birds, and I saw Rovio is a role model of to create a global platform. And surely Line is becoming global platform, but on the other hand, they is expanding in non-English speaking countries. So from the viewpoint of breaking language barrier, which point do you pay attention in order to create global platform as venture capitalists and entrepreneurs? Thank you.
Peter, please.
Yeah, so I mean, if you look at Rovio, when we build our products, be it games, animations, anything, we always take the approach that can we eliminate all text. So if you look at our games, we replace all text that we can with visual icons, so it works everywhere. But then when we have text, we always localize as well, so we want to make a great experience for our fans. But I think that, and another thing that when we use slides, we have a rule internally that let's not use any words. So all our presentations are visual. And I think that's something that, of course, Japan knows a lot about. So I think that there's probably something there when you think about creating global products. I think that it's a bit of course, I mean, English helps because, again, if you have 14 plus nationalities, then, it's pretty tough to communicate otherwise. So kind of like English comes naturally if you have that many different people. But I think that it's not just about then, creating one solution that fits all. I mean, for Japan, we want to create very Japanese products. So global but Japanese, global but Chinese. And that's kind of like what we have been doing, and it's again I think it's different for kind of like all companies, but always, of course, you have to take the local conditions into account. We created a cherry blossom episode for Angry Birds, and that was obviously done for Japan, and we worked with Japanese designers to make that happen. So it's again I think. Global, but very, very, very local as well.
As Marco Talmon just said about English, give you the illustration. In Israel, in the high-tech industry, in the startup, we speak to each other in Hebrew, but we write only in English. So even the mail that I send to my friend in the next room will be only in English. Frankly, I don't know so much to type the Hebrew language, but more the English. So this is 100% of the industry in Israel write in English to each other.
もう一問だけもしありましたら。
I think we can take one more question. Is there anyone with their hands up? Anyone with a question? Yes, the person in the back, please.
Funny to see three of my friends on the stage. Chris, Pete, David. My name is Akiya Fuji. I work for a M&A advisory service, a boutique in Tokyo. Funny to see that we have three big social game titles from Northern Europe. One being Rovio, of course, the Angry Birds. The other being the Clash of Clans from Supercell. And recently the Candy Crush Saga from King.com in London. What is it in Northern Europe that creates those, huge, humongous titles that the other regions cannot make? Are there any characteristics, distinctive differences against the other regions from your viewpoint, Pete?
I think that one of the starting points, and if you look at like King again, so yes, they are kind of like in the UK, but they started in Sweden. And I think if you look at kind of like Northern Europe and the Nordic countries, I think one thing there, yeah, obviously everybody speaks kind of like reasonable English, so that's kind of like the easy part. But I think that also very small countries. So we don't have the luxury of like the US or Japan or China that you can create a company. Let's say if we would have as an ambition to be number one in Finland, country of 5 million people, that's not that interesting. So when you start a company, it's a given that you have to create a global company, and I think that's why you see now the successful in games in particular, but I mean entertainment more broadly, because day one that the market is not in Finland or Sweden. I think Israel has the same, that hey, 8 million people, of course you need to go outside. So I think that's very important. And actually the previous panel, Joe was saying that okay, if he starts a company, he's going to go to the valley because he wants to make it global. My argument is that actually if you look at a lot of the US startups and success stories, they start out as very local, Facebook, Google, so on. I mean, they're not even in China. So how global is that? So I think that if you look at kind of like Europe, tiny countries, you have to think global from day one. I think that's something that is, it's just like you don't even think about it. Of course it's global. Of course it's English. Of course it works with the culture in the US, in China, in Japan. So that's something that I think really kind of like lays the kind of like the basis and the foundation for the success. And then maybe one thing there, that if you look at education, so it all starts with fantastic education. I think that's something that is also very important to emphasize, that you have to educate like all the people to a very high level, because so few people, so you need to do that.
Thank you for your interesting story. So let's wrap up the session. So 皆さん拍手ではいごめんなさい。
So we'd like to send off the speakers with